Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 134 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Hello, everybody. We are here today to talk about our Nebraska Cornhuskers, as per usual. You know, father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And today, today we'll be talking about Nebraska's loss to Purdue, as well as some of the big games from Week 7 of college football, including the big upset of Alabama that everyone's been chatting about. And we'll also preview what's coming up in Week 8, even though Nebraska has a bye week this weekend.
It sounds good, and we'll touch on a couple of other subjects, both nationally and relative to Nebraska.
Yep. But before we dive into all that, we got to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage.
Yes.
This week I have one of those, my Kona Brewing Company Longboard Island Lagers.
Wow. Now, is that a darker beer? That's more like an amber, or is that still a kind of a yellowish looking beer when you pour it in a glass?
I mean, I think it's a bit lighter. They have a different one that's like their amber ale.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Wow. I don't know that I've had that one. So enjoy. I am drinking a Labatt Blue from the Canadian country above us here, one of their best pilsners that I really enjoy. So grabbed a few of those before we left Michigan.
Well, that's one of my favorites.
Here we go. I know it's one of your favorites.
Okay.
Here we go. There's a little echo here.
There we go. All right. So we'll be starting things off by, of course, diving into the Nebraska game. And as usual, we gave predictions on the previous podcast. Both of us were on the mindset that Purdue was definitely the more talented team than us, given the struggles that our offense had in the previous week. We were being a bit pessimistic. So I predicted that Purdue would win 24-10, whereas you predicted that Purdue would win 45-10. And the actual score obviously ended up being closer than either of us expected, even though it was still a loss of 43-37. So it is always frustrating for us Nebraska fans because we've had so many of these one-score losses, right, under both Scott Frost and Mike Riley. So it's frustrating in games like these where if, just one or two things had gone differently, we could have won. We had some great big plays on the offensive side of the ball, and particularly with Trey Palmer, who had a historic day. But the defense really was struggling to keep up with what Purdue was throwing at them, and it just kind of became a bit of a score fest at a certain point.
It did. Yeah, that second half, it's like every time they touched the ball, people were scoring. Which that was probably the surprise and maybe one of the disappointments to me about the game was I actually felt like our defense might have a chance to slow Purdue down a little bit. Because our defense had been playing quite well. The previous 2 weeks we had not allowed a second half score and that sort of thing. So I felt like I know they were playing with great effort, and I thought, Purdue, although they have a very good offense, didn't necessarily have what people would have described as a great running game per se, until, of course, they faced us, and then they did. But they also threw the ball exceedingly well as well. We couldn't stop them in any way, it would seem. But they couldn't stop us, as it turned out, either.
Right. Well, it was definitely a difference in kind, even though both offenses were able to score. For example, if you look at like first downs, they had 38 first downs to our 15 and had over 600 yards of total offense against us. And once again, you look at time of possession, they had 43 minutes to our 17.
Which is crazy, right?
I mean, it is crazy. But that's because so many of our big scoring drives were off of big pass plays, right? And sometimes we would just score on that singular play, which is great, obviously, and gets people excited and, can really help swing the momentum. But at the same time, you're not giving your defense much time to recharge when you're having such quick drives, right? And then they're back out there having to deal with the team that's been giving them problems.
Correct. You are exactly right. Um, and that was one of the things is I don't know that we ever really got the chance to adjust. Like you say, take a breath. Let's figure out how we're going to adjust. And in the previous 2 games, I felt like the defensive staff had done a really good job of making adjustments at halftime. This time, not so much.
Right. Of course, one other big factor in the game was the turnovers. We had 2 interceptions while they had 1. And admittedly, the one we got right was near the beginning of the game when they were about to score on us, and we got a pick that basically saved a touchdown or at least a field goal from happening. So that was pretty good for us. But then Casey Thompson threw 2 really underthrown balls, both of which, if he had put a little bit more height on them, would have probably been completions. Like the receiver was open in both cases, but he just kind of misjudged it, and those were real momentum killers when they happened.
They were. They absolutely were. I mean, it doesn't come down as a turnover, but I believe we did have a blocked kick.
We did.
So that it had an impact on score as well. But let's talk about just one thing. Overall, well, a couple things. First, I will say that I was proud of how the team performed from the standpoint of effort. I never saw them give up. There were moments in that game where you could easily have seen a Nebraska team, given what's transpired with the team this year, they could have just packed it in, right? When the defense is giving up touchdowns, they could have really just put their heads down and kind of lost their focus, and the wheels could have come off, and they didn't. Right? They kept fighting, and they kept fighting, and they kept fighting. In fact, I would argue that late in the game, as badly as we'd played, we had them to a 4th down at midfield, and if it wasn't for a horrendous no call, which I've sent you the video on, right?
Yes.
That was that was just absolutely atrocious. Our guy literally got tackled, in one of these rub route scheme bull crap things that Purdue is well known for doing. Literally, the guy got hugged. You could see the arms of the other wide receiver on the outside, and this ended up being a scramble for a 1st down, right? Like what would I say? It was a short run that ended up leading to a 1st down on a 4th down. If they don't get that, we get the ball back with time and the possibility we're within 1 score of scoring. Maybe it was a 3rd down. I'm not remembering.
No,
properly.
You're right. It was 4th down. It was 4th.
It was a 4th down.
It was 4th and short around midfield, and I guess we would have been down only 4 points at the time,
right?
Not 7.
Okay, and there was like 3.5, almost 4 minutes left. So if that play gets called the way it should have been, and when it's that blatant, and there's a ref right there. Now I will concede that particular ref's job is to look at the offensive line play. There's another ref that should be looking at what's going on in the down the field, right? But it was right there in front of him. I mean, in his peripheral vision, you would think he would have seen that this guy just literally got tackled and mugged, and but nope, no flag. Yeah. And I know we harp on this probably on the podcast a little more than we should, but it sure does seem like Nebraska gets more than their average amount of missed calls, just flat out ignoring reality that occurs within the refereeing within the Big Ten. It just blows me away
Yeah.
how we continue to get on the short end.
Well, one stat that I did like to see after, the last two games have been high in penalties is that we only had 4 this game for 42 yards. They had 2 for 28. So that was good to see. But on the other hand, it shows the vast dichotomies in ref crews, because in the previous week against Illinois, or I'm sorry, not Illinois,
Indiana, not Indiana. No. Indiana.
That staff was calling offensive. They're calling offensive pass interference on both sides, right and left. And whereas in this game, I saw both us and them definitely getting handsy, on those pass plays. And the refs weren't calling it. They were letting the boys play. And it's like, well, how do you coach these kids if one staff will drill you for that and the other lets it happen, right?
Yep. Well, I'm watching the Georgia Tech Virginia game on silent or on mute right now, and that just happened. I mean, this defensive back absolutely got there early, knocked the ball away, and now the other team's having to go for a field goal because that didn't get called, and he clearly was there before the ball.
Yep.
And he just hit the upright with the field goal. It was a short chip shot, and he missed it.
Wow.
So they're going to get nothing out of that, right? And they were inside basically the 15-yard line.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's a huge, huge play in that game. And they're just going to move on from it. The announcers won't harp on it. But yet, the way they call holding, I don't know. It's just inexplicable how these referees, if we need more refs on the field to get more of these penalties called so that the game can be played the way it's designed to be played, that I would prefer that. I'm a purist, I guess, from that standpoint, and it frustrates me when you continue to see more and more of these failures on the part of the referee crews.
I'm going to bring this up now because so I don't forget it, but I believe it was the Oklahoma State game where they were playing against TCU. There was a weird whole thing where they went for a 4th down play and didn't get it, but the person who has the sticks on the field had it as 3rd down. And the Oklahoma State coach wasn't arguing about it or anything, right? Because it was obvious, everybody had been counting. It was 4th down, they didn't get it. There wasn't a controversy, but the refs still paused the game, and it was a 5-10 minute thing before they figured it out. And everybody was just kind of like, "What the heck are we doing here, guys?" It was bad. It was bad.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's just it just doesn't make sense to me. And with all the money that's being made by the leagues and all that sort of stuff, if they had to kick in an extra 10% or 15% so that they could add an additional crew member, and get an additional guy on that field so that more of the game could be called the way it was intended to be called, that the rules would be followed instead of just accepting that, it's just part of the game that a lot of these penalties aren't going to get called. Because what happens? Teams, if they know things aren't going to be called, they begin to teach techniques to hide those kinds of calls, right? If I know that I'm not going to get called for holding, I'm going to learn how to have my offensive lineman block in such a way that doesn't happen, right?
Right.
I'm going to teach them effectively to cheat. I'm going to teach them how to hold while blocking in a way that minimizes the risk of it being called a holding penalty. And that's where we are today. And the same thing with how guys fake contact, whether it's a quarterback faking contact, at the end of a play to try to solicit a roughing the passer, or whether it's, in wide receivers or defensive backs, dramatizing the amount of contact they're experiencing, in the secondary.
Right.
That kind of crap to
With,
me drives me crazy.
Well, but in this game, we got to take some advantage of that because you'll remember there was a late hit called on Thompson. And when you look at the
Yep.
replay, it really wasn't. The guy kind of pushed him right after he threw the pass, and Thompson
Agreed.
fell flat down on his back. And he gets a mini Oscar for acting there, which is something we've brought up in the past. Like, oh, why aren't we coaching our quarterbacks to do this if this is the way the game is being called? And so,
Well, absolutely, exactly. And see, but my point is that to me, I want us to either have an additional ref that's in the booth that can review all these kinds of calls and with video evidence make the decision. They make the determination that was a fake. This person, that wasn't real contact, because oftentimes on review you can see it, right? Because you can actually look at it and realize, okay, that guy's arm was fully extended. There's no way he could have had that much strength to cause this other guy's body to move the way it did, right? I mean, it's really obvious in many cases. And
right.
so I would rather have a ref in a booth with access to all the video capability and get more of these calls right. That's my point. I don't want to harp it any more than that, but it's just, this is another game. Purdue was the better team. Clearly, you just went through the stats. I mean, we were so lucky to even be hanging in there, and I'm proud of Nebraska and particularly Trey and our quarterback for hanging in there and continuing to fire and not giving up. Right? I like
Right.
that.
Yes.
So,
well, speaking of that, we definitely have to mention Trey Palmer because he was basically the reason we were still competitive in the game because they just couldn't stop him. He had 7 receptions for 237 yards, which is a Nebraska single game record.
yes.
And he was also on some of our kickoff returns, which we had 5 of for 111 yards, which is something I like to see too.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, and so, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that these guys keep trying. They keep playing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So, of course, we have a bye week this week, as I mentioned at the beginning. And the following week, we play against Illinois, which is another one of these very crucial games for us to kind of determine Mickey Joseph's potential future with the Nebraska football team. And an interesting thing is that Illinois also has a bye week. So it's not really an advantage. Both teams have that extra week to rest up and prepare for the game.
Right, exactly. And that's a bummer because I feel like if we had a bye week and they didn't, then maybe that might be something we could look to and say, all right, this is going to help us, right? But the reality is, like you say, both teams have it, so it's going to be very interesting. I have a feeling they're going to have a lot of new stuff ready to unfold against us when we play them.
Yeah. However, we're going to hold on the prediction for that game until our next podcast when we're a little closer to the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we did discuss briefly on the last podcast about this new collective, in this new world of NIL, that Nebraska was getting in on that as well. So I believe you had some more information on that.
Yes. So Matt Davison, who has been the color commentator on our broadcast for many, many years now. Well, many is probably overstating it, for about probably 8 or 10 years, and has been an associate athletic director since the Scott Frost hiring. And so he has been an integral part of the university's athletic department, and specifically, he has been involved heavily in fundraising, being a past player, of some renown and things of that nature. He has a great contact list of some of the key donors to the university and to the Nebraska athletic department in general. And in fact, there are a lot of indications that he was heavily involved and a key player in putting together the money that was raised for the new football and general athletic facilities that are being built currently. That are going to kind of get us back into the mix with some of the top programs in the country in terms of our overall sports support facilities, right? And so he helped raise a significant amount of that $155 or $160 million facility. So he's got some good fundraising chops and that sort of stuff. And he and another key player in the fundraising arm have both resigned from their positions at the university to take a position with this new collective to build up, and they're specifically targeting, of course, the revenue sports of football and men's basketball, as well as women's volleyball, which at Nebraska, of course, is a big time sports program. One of the only women's volleyball programs that's already a revenue generator. It's not, an Olympic sport that requires money from the trough, so to speak, of the athletic department. It actually makes money. So those athletes are some of the most visible in the whole state, and so this collective is a big step for Nebraska in kind of keeping pace with some of the other schools that are also building some very organized NIL programs that they're going to be able to do that. And he resigned immediately in the middle of the season, from his role as the color commentator and as an assistant AD, so he could immediately get to work on this, knowing that they've got a new football coach coming in. They wanted to already have some things rolling and in place that they could speak to with potential candidates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. And then, like we said, in this NIL world, right, you kind of have to get with the times or get left behind, right? And
it's going to be real interesting, Alex, because there's a lot of people taking data, right? Everybody's taking note. And so there's two things, NIL and then the whole transfer portal thing, right? Everybody's making special notations about, okay, all these transfers, all this movement happened, and they moved for NIL reasons. They moved, through the portal, blah, blah, blah. How many teams really went aggressively after portal, and did they have success? I mean, imagine Nebraska without Trey and without Thompson.
mm-hmm.
Where would we be? Because we were probably going to lose Adrian no matter what, because he was a fifth year, so even before the transfer portal stuff happened, he was already a graduating kid with a year of eligibility, so he could have left as a graduate student in any case, even before the new rules, right? And so Nebraska would be a hurting unit right now if we didn't have that, right? So, and you think about right now on our offensive line that Anthony is starting now at right tackle for us. He was one of them too. So Nebraska would be in a world of hurt and probably be winless at this point if it wasn't for those guys, right? So people are taking note of that, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think you might overreact if you just look at this year, but 3 or 4 years from now, after there's 4 years of data on that stuff, there will be some real solid trends. And I have a feeling the people who are being aggressive with NIL structures like this collective are going to end up being on the positive side of that ledger.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. I would have to look back at the timeline because I feel like Adrian didn't leave until after we knew that Casey was coming and all that stuff.
No, it was the reverse.
It was the reverse.
He had announced before. Yep. We didn't know at that point in time. We did not yet. We were already recruiting, and there was lots of talk about Casey coming to Lincoln as a transfer quarterback, right? So our coaching staff had already actively started going out and recruiting some portal depth at quarterback, but Adrian had not yet, Adrian had already made his decision before Casey did. Or Purdue.
Right. Although then we talked about Texas A&M, right? And how they were the number one recruiting class this past year, and have had kind of mixed results so far in the season.
Well, but again, that recruiting class can't be expected to be the backbone of that team this year. That experiment and determination really is still a couple years away. Their issues are more internal in terms of much like ours. They got it appears, some culture issues within their, team that might need to be addressed. And that's that's one of the challenges I think with this whole portal thing is how do you build a culture when the flow in and out of the program is so dramatic. There's not enough stability to really create a group of leaders and then establish an expectation, unless you're an Alabama or a Clemson or an Ohio State, where you have a couple of guys come in and out, but the vast majority of the players who matter are in there for the long haul, so to speak, and they're part of the tradition, and because they have success on their side, another person come in can do nothing but respect it. If you're coming into a program that's struggling like a Nebraska, what reason do you have to respect what the older guys or the guys that have been there a while have to say? You guys are losers.
Right. And one other piece of news is that Isaiah Garcia Castaneda transferred out of the program. He was one of our wide receivers. And I know he didn't have kind things to say about Mickey Joseph.
Well, specifically his dad took to Twitter and had some not so complimentary things to say about Mickey. And that was in response to Mickey basically throwing a little shade at the wide receiver who left, simply saying, "Hey, we couldn't give him what he wanted. He wanted to be a bigger part of the offense, and we couldn't do that. So he left, And so he kind of threw a little shade at this kid, and so his dad kind of came to his defense, so to speak, and said, "Well, Mickey's kind of making it sound like he quit on the team because he wasn't getting enough touches. He wasn't getting the ball enough. But if you look at it, he was the kid that had the most yards and the most pass attempts thrown to him during the first game of the year in Ireland. And then as things progressed from there on out, he got fewer and fewer opportunities to where he wasn't getting any. He was no longer starting. He wasn't really in the rotation anymore. So something happened during the course of that time, and it was clear that relationship had deteriorated.
Yeah, that's kind of
welcome to our new reality, right? And that kid made a conscious decision. I played less than 4 games, so I still have a year of eligibility. I'm going to go somewhere where I can play.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I that's my guess is that it's mostly something was going wrong in practice, or Mickey didn't think he was all that, and the kid didn't appreciate that. So
right. Well, and that's the power that the athlete now has to make that decision, and that kind of me first mentality is going to make it very hard to build a championship culture. Right? If that happens at Alabama, they say good riddance to him immediately, and they don't look back, and they replace him with a guy that's just as good. Now, Nebraska, on the other hand, not in that situation. And a guy like that, he hurt our depth. Him leaving hurt our depth. Now, granted, he hadn't played much in the more recent games, but our depth in that room was diminished because of him leaving. And so he was important, but he wasn't willing to accept that, okay, I need to fight my way back, and all the literally decades and decades gone by, Alex, since football, collegiate football has emerged as a legitimate sport. I mean, that sticking around and hanging in there, and even though you didn't like what the coach was doing or you felt he was being unfair to you or whatever, the number of stories of guys that felt that way initially, but were talked into staying by their teammates and their friends and stuff, and then ended up becoming superstars. I mean, there's countless stories like that, and there's plenty of them where they stayed and and nothing ever materialized. And usually that was because they just weren't that good. That there were other players that were just better than them on the team, right?
Right.
But you stick it out was the theme, and the rules were kind of in place to make it hard for you to make that decision. So team came first. Now it's me. And NIL enhances that me mentality. And so now a coach is going to have to figure out how to play within and organize and build his culture within the framework of that me first mentality while still establishing the benefits of team first mentality. Good luck on how you do that. And I think that's still a big unknown.
Just a funny anecdote. I was listening to the Tennessee radio broadcast at a certain point during the Tennessee Alabama game while I was driving. And I think one of the commercials was for a political candidate, because election season's coming up. And it said,
Yep.
it was delivered by a player from the Tennessee team. And I was like, is a college student's endorsement really going to be the winner on a political ad? I couldn't help thinking that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the answer is if he's a well liked and respected player, then certainly some fans of that football program might very well be more inclined to vote for that guy because at least he's going to support my volunteer football players.
Right.
Right. And that's important to me.
It may have been like a proposal, instead of a candidate. I don't quite remember, but it was something like
Right.
that. The one other small piece of news is that there was actually a court case where the USA Today said that the University of Nebraska had to disclose the metrics mutually agreed to in Scott Frost's contract. And so Trev Alberts did reveal that, and it was to make a bowl game and win 6 games. So that was kind of
that was the minimum standard.
That was what had been set down by Trev to keep Scott
Right.
around.
Right. Yep. And it's too bad that he had to share that. I didn't know that it was a lawsuit that brought that out. I thought that was just a choice that Trev made for some other reason. But that doesn't surprise me that was the minimum standard. If he had gotten, like I had said for a long time, if he got to a bowl game, that he would be able to keep his job.
Yep. Well, that's about what we were saying as well. Like 6 wins was the minimum.
It doesn't surprise me, I guess. It's disappointing that it was that low, that you're going to keep a guy around and continue to pay him, $4 or $5 million a year to be coaching a 500 football team, when the reality is that next year, given our schedule next year, 6 wins this year, unless something magical happens, would not lead to more than 6 wins next year, just based on how our schedule shifts, because our schedule gets a lot tougher in the coming years. So in terms of our crossovers, I mean, this year our crossovers from the other side of the other division were Indiana and Rutgers. So we went
and Michigan.
Right. So we're 2-0 right now.
Right. Against that side of the division. Well, it will not be so kind in future years, although with USC and UCLA coming into the Big Ten, some of those are going to be kind of torn up as they figure out what the new schedules are going to be.
But the thing that irritates me about that is we've been in the Big Ten for 10 years now, a little more than 10 years. I think this is our 11th year, and we've had the bulk of these the first Legend and Leaders division schedules were heavily burdened on Nebraska with crossover games with the best teams from the opposite division, whether it was back then Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State, to where we've played Ohio State for 6 years in a row. No other West Division team has done that or had to do that. So, I mean, it's just one of those. And now here we're going to have another change, and we may go away from divisions completely. And that they're going to push the reset button on the TV contract, and they're going to want to take advantage of the rabid and large Nebraska fan base that watches television and attends football games, and they're going to put us up against those other big name blue blood traditional programs, whatever you want to call them, way more than a lot of the other folks that are our old division mates. And it just frustrates the hell out of me because, I think our win-loss record would look a lot different if we had been playing Iowa's schedule over the last 6 years.
Right.
Scott would still be our coach.
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but
I would. And that's not necessarily a good thing based on what we now know Scott was doing and the amount of effort Scott was putting in. But I'm just telling you, if he had won a few more games, he wouldn't have lost his job. So,
yeah, that's
anyway.
true. Um,
Side thing.
yeah. And then some quick national topics as we get into that now. Interestingly, we've been hearing talk that Texas and Oklahoma wanted to leave for the SEC earlier. They're scheduled to leave in 2025, but I think they wanted to leave in 2024. And it sounds like Fox is the group that's kind of blocking that from happening because they're part of the Big 12's media deal. And I guess they're not letting that happen ahead of schedule, which means that USC and UCLA probably will come to the Big Ten before Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC.
Yeah, and I mean all these contract stuff are so intertwined, and there's obviously some vested interest for Fox to number one, maximize whatever relationships and TV content they currently have rights to because of the contracts with the Big 12, but it also doesn't hurt their situation if the Big Ten can pull off the coup of getting USC and UCLA into the league and a new television contract on the roll before the SEC can, right? They're doing their conference partner Big Ten a favor by doing that. So I understand why Fox is doing that, but that might come back to haunt them sometime in the future when they're trapped in an undesirable situation in a complex TV relationship, right? And they can't get out of it because ESPN is the unwilling participant. I mean, what goes around comes around, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, there's some other news that apparently the Big 12's big media deal, I guess, was scheduled to expire after the Pac-12's. But now there's talk and rumors that the Big 12 is going to renegotiate that in the upcoming weeks, kind of get the jump on the Pac-12 in that way. Because I think the Pac-12 was kind of, feeling a little bit safer because the Big Ten, Kevin Warren and the Big Ten has said that like he's not really interested in expanding further at this time. So it seems like, the Big Ten wasn't going to poach any more Pac-12 teams, but now there's the possibility that the Big 12 might do it, considering they've already brought in some new teams to fill in for Texas and Oklahoma. And if they were able to get a more attractive media deal right now or, in the near future, then they might be able to entice some Pac-12 schools away so that they aren't the conference that collapses, right?
Right, exactly. Well, and do any of those teams out there in the Pac-12, do they make that decision before the Big Ten acts? Because if Washington and Stanford and Oregon and these teams that are often named as being desirable to add to the Big Ten, if that doesn't happen, does a Colorado, Arizona State, Utah, do they make the decision to leave the Pac-10 for the Big 12 without Washington and Oregon? And why wouldn't the Big 12 go after them, right? Because those are the bigger names, those are the larger television audiences. So I don't know. It's like the tumblers need to fall in the right order.
Right. Yeah. So we'll keep our eye on that. All the conference politics kind of going on in the background here.
Yeah. And I'm here to tell you when any of these conference commissioners, whether it's Warren or not, says, "Oh, we're going to stand pat for right now," you might as well believe the opposite of that. So I'm not buying any of that crap. They're always looking.
Fair enough. So now diving into some of the.
Hey, may I mention one more thing? Oh. Today was the college football playoff committee meeting. That group.
Yep.
They had a meeting today, and so they did a press conference afterwards. They did not make any final decisions or anything like that. They weren't able to come to agreement. So time's kind of running out on them because they were trying to get it set up so that 2024 would be the first year of the new college football playoff. They wouldn't wait till 2026 or whatever it is. They were going to try to pull that forward, but they weren't able to come to a mutual agreement for everyone to pull that forward by 2 years. So they're still working on it. They haven't given up on the idea, but they are they did not make any major headway.
I see. So is the thinking then that like the 12-team playoff is something that's going to happen, but now it's a question of just how fast it comes about?
Correct. Exactly. When is it going to happen? Right.
Right.
So,
I see.
I didn't realize they were trying so aggressively to get it to 2024, but apparently that was the hope. But that's starting to fade. They admit that time is not on their side for that to happen.
I see. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think obviously there's appetite for the 12-team playoff, and so if they're going to do it anyways, why not get to it sooner and get that extra money rolling in and all that.
Well, and that's the logic. But the conferences are working really hard to leverage their little piece of the pie because that kind of helps guarantee or sustain their existence a little bit.
Right. That's true. So talking about week 7 of college football, it was an eventful weekend. I actually, I ended up going to a bar that was kind of cool here in LA and watching a lot of the games there, including Nebraska's game, of course. And the big one, of course, that everybody was talking about was Alabama versus Tennessee, which was played at Tennessee. We gave predictions for that particular game, and I was on the side of Tennessee.
Yes, you were.
Yeah. Here we go. I said that they were going to win 28-24, whereas you said that Alabama was going to win 35-21. So neither of us were quite right in terms of the type of scores because it ended up being 52-49, a much higher scoring game. But I was pretty close on the margin of victory. 4 points ended up being 3 points where Tennessee pulled out the W.
Yes. And like I say, the important thing is you picked Tennessee to win it. And I espoused greatly about, how I felt like Nick Saban would have his guys ready just because they had played so poorly the week before. And usually he's able to inspire a dramatically improved performance the week after he has what he considers a substandard performance. But he wasn't able to do that, right? Like, I didn't get to watch that game to see how it unfolded. So I don't know if did one or the other of those teams have a considerable lead and then lose it as the game progressed, to late stages, or was it pretty much back and forth the whole way?
Tennessee, I'm pretty sure they had the lead the majority of the game, for sure. And one interesting fact is that when I gave that prediction on the last week's podcast, it still wasn't clear that Bryce Young was going to be there for this Tennessee game. I think Saban had said that they were hoping for him to be there, but it wasn't sure, right? And so I thought, oh, well, if there's a chance that Bryce Young plays and he's not 100%, or the backup plays who didn't do great the previous week, that would enhance Tennessee's ability to win. But Bryce Young did play, and he played quite well. There were quite a few situations where Tennessee got in the backfield and Bryce Young just ran around them and still found a way to throw a good pass, But what was the real story of the game was the mistakes on Alabama's part, especially penalties. They had 17 penalties in that game and are now the worst, bottom of the barrel in the FBS in terms of penalties.
Wow, 17's a lot. That sounds very Nebraska-like.
Right. Well, and I think you were watching the part, right, where they had like 5 in a row, and it didn't matter too much because it was just backing them up another half yard, against their own goal line. But it was kind of a contagious thing, right? When one happened, it seemed like more would pile on.
Yep, exactly. It was crazy.
Yeah. So that was a really fun game to watch, and I thought that Tennessee had blown it because they had a fumble, I think, right next to their own goal line. So they basically gifted Alabama a free touchdown with that turnover,
Right.
and I think that tied up. I think no, I think it was tied, and then that gave Alabama the lead. Um, and then they went and scored. They got the ball back. They scored pretty quickly. Alabama had a drive and had to kick a decent field goal, like in the 30 to 40 yard range, and the guy missed it. So it was still a tie game, but there was only like 30 seconds left, and I almost thought like, okay, Tennessee, you kind of dodged a bullet there, with the missed field goal, right? Maybe just run out the clock, go into overtime, and
Yep.
try to win it there. But no, they were aggressive and they threw it a bunch and they completed those passes and got into range for like a long 50-yard field goal or something like that.
Right. It was like 40 something.
Yeah, it was 40
Yep.
something. And it was actually tipped. Like one of the Alabama players, like pinky finger, got on the ball. And so it spun like a wounded duck. It was an ugly kick, but it went far enough and it made the field goal. And game over. Fans flood the field. They take the
Oh yeah.
goalposts out of the stadium and throw it in the river. It was a historic night there in Tennessee.
Yeah. It, it really was. Well, and speaking of historic, I think the other historic thing is going to be the memes that we're going to get to see from the colossal meltdown child what a temper tantrum that Nick Saban had after the muffed punt by Alabama during the game, where he was jumping around like a child in the middle of a grocery store who was having a tantrum.
Yeah, I saw a lot of there was one gif where he was saying, what the F are you doing? Very clearly to one of his players
Right, right.
on the sidelines. So yeah, my prediction came true. This Alabama team clearly has talent. Obviously they still scored quite a bit on,
A
Tennessee. And
good
like I said,
Tennessee team. Yep.
Bryce Young played pretty well. But they're undisciplined. Clearly, you don't
Right.
get 17 penalties right in a normal year.
Right. No, you're right. And they got some issues. There's no doubt about it. And but the thing is that until they're completely out of it and are in a position where they cannot get to that conference championship game, and they're not even close to the top four, so that even with the conference championship game plays, losses and wins and such, that they don't find themselves back in the mix like they've done in previous years. If Alabama is able to come in through the back door again and get that fourth spot somehow, then that's the kind of shit that allows them to gel, and then the athleticism matures, and wham bam, all of a sudden they're winning a national championship. And I don't want to see that. I want to see them out, and I want no part of that.
Right. Another game that we gave a prediction on in the Big 12 was Oklahoma State versus TCU.
Yes.
We had the similar scores, but just flipped. So I said that Oklahoma State would win 38-31, and you said that TCU would win 38-31.
Yes.
And it was looking like it was going to be a pretty solid Oklahoma State victory. They had like a 17-point lead around the middle
Like
of
at half. Yeah, about halftime.
right around halftime, like middle of the game. I was looking in their
Yep.
favor. And then TCU in the second half kind of managed to claw it back, started getting their offense really going. And so I think they were able to tie it up, go into overtime. And then I think Oklahoma State turned it over. And so it was an easy field goal kick for the win for TCU. So I saw Oklahoma State fans were saying that with their coach, who's been there for a long time, been quite successful there. But I think their criticism of him is that he puts his foot off the gas. He goes too conservative, right? And and kind of lets teams get back into it when they shouldn't.
Yes. Okay. Well, let him criticize him. Maybe he becomes interested in the Nebraska job.
Dad's all for that.
Well, he's a guy that I'm sure Trev probably had on his list to talk to. Not even necessarily to talk to him about our job, but to just talk to him about what you need to be a good, Power 5 head coach, because that guy's been consistently successful for a long time.
Right.
He's not won a lot of championships or anything, but he's a darn good coach.
Yep. And then there was the Penn State-Michigan game in the Big Ten. I predicted that Penn State would win, mostly due to the fact that they had a bye week going into the game. So I thought that might give them the spark they needed. So I predicted that they would win 24-21, whereas you predicted that Michigan would win 31-24. However, it ended up being quite the dominant win for Michigan of 41-17. I started watching that game, and then I eventually kind of turned it off once I saw the score kind of ballooning, because I think it was 17-17 at one point, and Penn State kind of was lucky to be tied in the game because Michigan had been dominating it.
Yes, Michigan was dominating the game, and the only reason that Penn State was in the game was because of two really big plays that basically put them in a position to score the 14 points, and that's about all they did the whole game. So they weren't really able to put anything legitimate together against Michigan. Michigan looked really quite dominant.
Yeah. So I know that your buddy Brian Clower was nervous about that game because it was the first real tough challenge for Michigan in their season so far, but clearly they passed the test with flying colors. So they got to be feeling a little better down there in Ann Arbor.
I think they are, and they've got a couple of interesting games. They've got the rivalry game with Michigan State coming up here in a couple of weeks, and I think they play Illinois at some point later in the season, which Illinois is emerging as one of the better teams on the West Side. So we'll see how that all plays out, and obviously they have Ohio State at the end of the year. So.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Illinois played against Minnesota this past weekend. Of course, they're the team that Nebraska will be playing in next, so it's of note for us. And they won 26-14. However, I would say it was a game where Minnesota kind of lost it more than Illinois won it. Minnesota was -3 in turnovers, and 7 of their 14 points were scored off of a kickoff return, which might show that, Illinois has some vulnerabilities there, which we could take advantage of. But their offense really wasn't able to get anything done. And when you're -3 in turnovers, it's hard to win any game like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Frankly, you don't deserve to win a game that you're -3 in turnovers. And most coaches would agree with that, right? Like, you didn't play winning football if you were -3 in turnovers.
Exactly. And another interesting game that happened this past week was Utah versus USC, where Utah, who was ranked 20th and USC ranked 7th, Utah managed to pull out the upset of 43-42. That was one I didn't watch live, or I think I might have caught some of it live, but regardless, I watched the recap of the game to kind of refresh myself, and there were some interesting things that happened in it. There was a roughing the passer call earlier on in the game that went Utah's way, saying that, a USC guy roughed the passer that basically gave them a touchdown and foiled an interception because the quarterback threw an interception into the end zone because they were close to scoring. So it would have been, 0 points for Utah, right? But then there's this roughing the passer call that gives them the automatic first down, and then they score legitimately. But the call was totally bogus. Like, it was not a real roughing the passer call. So USC really, or Utah really got a break on that one. And I kind of feel like the coach may have kind of felt that momentum, and the fact that they were lucky to still be in the game because they had to make a late drive to score. And when they made that score, they decided to go for 2. So it was a tie ball game, and they went for 2. So that was basically the game right there, and they got it. So I always admire a coach who kind of has the balls to go for that, because that's a tough one.
Well, it is a tough one, and it's against the book, right? The book, so to speak, tells you that, especially because I believe that was a home game, right, for them.
Yes.
that you go for the tie and go into overtime and take your luck against in overtime because you're the home team. But I agree. I think oftentimes you need to assess the situation, and if you have a play that you really believe in, and that is either a counter off of something you've had success with within the game plan that you already have implemented, or something, then you gotta do it. Whereas if you're really struggling on offense and you're like, man, this is as close as I'm going to get, that would be another reason to do it, right? Like if I go in overtime, my chances are not very good that I'm going to be able to drive it down and score in the red zone because we are, 0 for 4 in the red zone or whatever. So it just, I wish that coaches would take the circumstances of that particular game and not just make the decision based on the book, so to speak, so quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to run through a couple of other scores here that we can talk about. Baylor played against West Virginia and lost 43-40. So they've kind of lost a couple games here that they wouldn't have liked to. And I believe their starting quarterback got hurt in that game as well.
Yes.
So I couldn't help thinking like, well, maybe, Baylor having a bit of a disappointing season by their recent standards. Maybe that's good for Nebraska going after Dave Aranda,
If they want to, but again, he's hurting his perceived value, right? Because again, he's a young head coach. He really doesn't have that many years as a head coach. He's got quite a number of years as a defensive coordinator with great success in both the Big Ten and the SEC, and he has one really good year in the Big 12 as a head coach. But now he's like in his third or fourth year there, and these are his players now. Most of the players from the previous regime are, graduated and gone. And he came into this season basically top 15 preseason ranking, preseason number one in the Big 12. Most people were picking them to win the Big 12. And now, heck, looking at the rest of their schedule, they might struggle to get the 6 wins.
Could be. One interesting thing about the game, because I watched the recap of it, is that because West Virginia won by 3 points, right? And they had one of the rarest things you'll see in college football, which was a blocked PAT taken back for a safety. So right there, that's a 3-point difference, right? Because Baylor missed on the 1 point they could have gotten, and West Virginia got 2 points off the safety, which basically ends up being the 3-point difference that won West Virginia the game, right?
Yep, exactly.
So that was an interesting one. And then there was one I know you watched, which was Michigan State versus Wisconsin, kind of an ugly game that went into double overtime where Michigan State managed to win 34-28.
Yes, and it was just one of those games. I can't even accurately describe what I was watching while I was watching it, just in terms of, both teams were having success, but then they wouldn't. And I guess that's all I can say is that they would find ways to not have the kind of, okay, this team's starting to get it going, and then something would happen to the other team. It was just really hard to get a feel for the game. I'll just put it that way.
Right.
And so when it went into overtime, I really thought Wisconsin would win it. Even though I believe it was a home game for Michigan State, I thought Wisconsin kind of was going into the initial overtime with a better position to win the game based on what I had witnessed. But then, weird things happened, and eventually I think there was a turnover on like the first play of the second overtime. So that team didn't get any points. So then the other team just had to effectively get at least 3, and then they would have won. But then they ended up getting 7. Like on one of their second play, they threw a touchdown pass.
Right. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, because I know you mentioned that you were impressed by Wisconsin's performance the previous week, and of course they've got their new coach as well. So you kind of thought that maybe they were turning the corner, but they lost to a Michigan State team that's really struggled this year so far.
Right. And I just don't know what that means for Wisconsin. feel like they were starting to get their offense in sync, and their offensive line was maybe getting a little better. And they obviously scored some points against Michigan State, and I don't know that Michigan State's defense is horrid or anything. So, but we'll just have to see how this all plays out with Wisconsin, because we obviously have them on our schedule. So
right. And before we get into our predictions for the Week 8 games, I know you wanted to talk just a bit about Nebraska's coaching search. Obviously, that's something that's kind of been going on in the background, and I kind of brought up the point about Dave Aranda, potentially being more available to Nebraska. What are your observations from recent weeks?
Well, the thing is that people keep, pounding some of the same names, and every week there's a few new names that come on the list, and then every one of the guys that's on the list that's been discussed, people are observing their weekly games. So an Aranda loss or Matt Campbell losing at Iowa State, those kinds of things all of a sudden starts to change people's minds. And I just feel like, what, all of this is just gobbledygook. It's just consuming people's time. And if I tried to take a step back and say, okay, what is Trev Albers doing? Well, as soon as he, knew that he was going to let go of Scott and move on to another coach, he had already been doing some preparations. He's been having conversations, most likely since just a few days after he took the job as athletic director a little over a year ago, with the people that he does know within, the sports administration groups. But he's also a former player, so he was reaching out to former players at Nebraska, former players that he played with, in professional football, and some of his broadcasting connections. I mean, he was probably talking with anybody that he thought might have some legitimate expertise in what it takes to be a great head coach, right? And then he has his own opinion, and I think so. I think there's just been a lot of investigating going on, and then he's really doing this with the assistance of a search team that they hired to help him with the selection. And so they've got a criteria they're working on, and they're probably working on a group of. They probably started with 15 or 20 names, and they've worked it down. And I would guess that at this point, it's probably down to a top 5. And now they've reached out to all 5 of those people directly or indirectly, and they have a feel for both their own personal pecking order of which one of those guys they'd like to go after first, second, third, and they also probably know how warm those people are to the possibility of coming to Nebraska. So it really becomes one of those kind of matchup things, right? Where, okay, this is our first choice, but he's very lukewarm on even considering Nebraska because he likes the gig he's got. And so we'd have to really entice him to bring him along. And then you have the complicating factor of Mickey Joseph, right? We're giving Mickey an opportunity, so we're timing this process. So I think people just need to chill their wheels and understand that that Trev is going to go through this process, and he's going to be ready when he's ready. And it might involve finding somebody who is either already interested in having Mickey remain a member of the staff, or is willing to take that caveat, where there might be some other guys that are very high on Trev's list, but have absolutely under no circumstances would they accept Mickey as part of their staff, and so because I think in a perfect world, best case scenario for Trev would be that Mickey does well enough that people want Mickey to be the head coach a little bit, but not so well that there's big pressure for him to make Mickey the head coach, so that you could maybe say, okay, Mickey's going to stick around, and maybe our Billy Bush, those two guys stick around with the new head coach.
Mm-hmm. When we've talked about that before as a possibility, one thing that we had said was that this stretch of 4 games right here in the middle of the season was very key to whether Mickey would potentially remain as the head coach. And I
would agree.
And we had said that 3-1 would be very good, and kind of like the passing grade that he needs. Whereas 2-2, probably more mixed bag, maybe not Mickey. And so right now we're 2-1, right? We lost here to Purdue, but in a competitive way, we didn't get blown out.
Right.
So this next game against Illinois, I think, is really key to where Trev lands on that, right?
I would agree. I would agree, and because I know he knows he will get greatly criticized if he chooses to hire Mickey by a certain portion of both the Nebraska support network of supporters, but also nationally, because it's going to be like, well, this is just like Helton out at USC and other examples where the popular assistant become Ed Orgeron, right? People like that. And how often does that really translate to great success, like Dabo Sweeney, right? So, but it's not that simple, right? There's some dynamics there that are at play, and so I think the easiest path for Trev might not be the one that he gets, but the easiest path would be for Mickey to maybe win a couple more games, end up 5-7, not quite good enough to get to a bowl game, not quite good enough to have all the fans clamoring for Mickey to be the next head coach, but enough success that whoever Trev does choose will see the value in keeping a guy like Mickey around, right? And maybe Billy Bush is tied to that as well, depending on what the defense does the rest of the year. So that because those are two coaches that, number one, understand Nebraska, number two, have a history of outstanding recruiting performance, and are showing themselves to be at least pretty good coaches, if not really good coaches. Right? Hard to tell in such a short period of time, but I feel like Bill Bush particularly has taken a defense that was just in shambles and has made it into a defense that, while still not great, is playing with great zest and hard for 4 quarters, and he is scheming it and calling it in such a way that he's putting them in a position to succeed,
right?
Even if they don't execute. But so to me, that's a big deal, and I would love to see those two guys hang around on a future staff with, say, a Dave Aranda as a coach, or a Matt Rule, or whoever they might end up with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of conversation out there about Lane Kiffin.
Okay, well, I was going to mention, because we talked about Matt Rule on the previous podcast, and it's since come out in a statement from somebody who knows him or whatever that there's very few college positions he'd be interested in, none of which are open right now, was basically the statement. Right. So I don't think any Nebraska fans should be crossing their fingers for him.
I agree. And if I'm him, and I've got basically 2 to 3 years of $8 million a year guaranteed because of the contract I signed, why would I be in a hurry? I'd be far better off waiting until that one of those select jobs came available, and then I make them aware I'm interested. That doesn't mean he's going to get it, but he has the luxury of time to do that while going and rehabbing his reputation a little bit by hanging out with a bunch of people who know the sport. So,
yeah, talking about week 8 of college football, which is coming up here. Probably maybe the biggest game and the one we'll be predicting today is in the Pac-12 with UCLA against Oregon. It is at home for Oregon, and obviously they had the embarrassing loss to Ohio State at the beginning of their season, but since then they've done much better, while UCLA is having their best season in a long time, beat USC, right? I'm sorry, they haven't played USC yet, but they're doing well.
Yes, exactly.
So I guess the question is, do you think, this momentum that UCLA is on can propel them to beat a talented Oregon team? Or is Oregon's talent and home field advantage too much, you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of either one of these coaches, but they're both doing a good job this year. Chip obviously has a great reputation as a brilliant mind and all that. And then the guy up there in Oregon is a brilliant recruiter. Um, but has less reputation, let's say, as a great coach. Game preparer. So, but it's at home, and that Oregon home field is pretty significant, right?
Right.
So, uh, I'm gonna say Oregon. Oregon wins this one because they're at home, and that home field matters in this particular situation. Even though I think Chip is the better coach.
Okay. Well, what's your score then?
Gosh, both of these guys are scoring some points. Although UCLA's defense has been maybe better than recent years, right? So I'm going to still say because of the environment and everything like that, that there's going to be some big plays after some feeling out time. It's going to start slow, but it's going to end with a bang. So it's going to end up being like a 35-31 Oregon.
Okay, interesting. So I just Googled UCLA here. So the big one I was thinking of was Utah. So the Utah team that just beat USC
Beat
here,
USC, yeah.
they beat Utah 42-32. And that was on October 8th. So they've had a bye week. So they've had extra time here to prepare for this Oregon game. And as I mentioned, UCLA, I feel like they've got great momentum because, they're having this unusually good season, right? Whereas for Oregon, there's more expectations on them. Now I've just clicked on Oregon and they also had a bye week. So I guess the bye week goes both ways. So both teams have had time to prepare, which may favor Chip Kelly, right? Like you mentioned, if we think that he is the better game day coach, and we know he loves his, complex offensive schemes and stuff, right? If he's had 2 weeks to prepare for this particular game, I think he might throw some surprises Oregon's way. So I'm going to predict that it'll be a close game, but that UCLA will pull out the win away. And it'll be a high-scoring game, typical of the Pac-12. So I'm going to say it'll be UCLA 45 to Oregon score of 38.
45-38. Wow.
Yep. I'm going to go with that. All right. And then in terms of other games in week 8, one I'm kind of interested in is Clemson versus Syracuse. It's at home for Clemson, and they just played against Florida State last week and won 34-28. Florida State kind of made a push late, to make the game closer because I think Clemson had like a 21-point lead at one point. Like they were really controlling the game for the majority. So I don't think, I think Florida State had to go for the onside kick, and then didn't get it. It was one of those situations. So Clemson controlled the game, but, let off the gas enough to nearly let Florida State come back into it, right? Whereas Syracuse just upset NC State 24-9. So they've clearly got some talent. So I predict that Clemson's going to win that game, but I think Syracuse could make it close.
I agree. So what is the score?
I will go ahead and say, I'll say that it's a bit lower scoring and that Clemson's able to win 28-21.
All right, that's good. Now, see, I don't know that much about Syracuse. I have to admit, I haven't followed them enough, and so it's probably recency bias with the success that Clemson has had. So I am going to go with Clemson winning, and I'm going to say that it's going to be 35-21, a pretty comfortable win for Clemson.
All right, fair enough. Very cool. So, yeah, there's a couple other games here that we won't predict, such as Texas playing against Oklahoma State, Alabama playing against Mississippi State, and TCU playing against Kansas State. So some kind of interesting matchups from teams that either won or lost big the previous week. kind of seeing how they bounce back and react to that.
Right. Well, I'm curious about. I believe Penn State plays Ohio State in the Big Ten this week, and
No.
no.
Penn State plays Minnesota.
Oh, okay. It must be the following week. That's the Penn State Ohio State game then. Okay. Penn State plays Minnesota. Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Minnesota. I'll have my eye on.
Minnesota coming off the loss to Illinois. Penn State coming off the loss to Michigan. So, neither of them with great momentum. But it's at home for Penn State, so I feel pretty good that they'll win that solidly.
Well, and if they do, that really puts Minnesota's season, in a downward spiral then, because there's a series of games there that they have lost, and so all the momentum from early in the season when they were winning all those games is going to be gone. So not that hurts my feelings.
Nope. Well, it gives me a little bit more confidence going into our game against them later in the season. So
yeah, maybe so, because that's at home. That's a home game for us, if I remember correctly. We play Minnesota at home.
Right.
So,
all right. Well, it's a bye week for Nebraska, but we'll still have plenty to enjoy about this weekend of college football. I'll actually be doing a lot at a film festival this weekend, so I won't really be able to watch many of the games, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. All righty.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy your weekend and what you got going on, and we're gonna do the same here as we do our little wandering travel from our summer home in Michigan to our ultimate destination down in Florida.
You say summer home in Michigan as if you guys have some palatial estate up there.
We do.
It's called an RV. There you go. All right.
It's a beautiful one, though.
That's all right. It is nice. All right. So
bud.
If you out there enjoyed listening to us, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us ratings or reviews there. We always love hearing from the fans. We'll read any comments we get out on the air. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.